Hello, friends. So happy to have you here with me today at Radical Joy. If you've been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time with me, well, I'm glad you're here. Each week, I'm here with you talking to myself about things that weigh on my mind and heart, hoping if you're dealing with something similar, we can adjust our perspectives as you listen. Hey, if you're struggling with something that needs immediate attention, please know that help is available. Just dial 988 nationwide in the U.S. to reach the Mental Health and Suicide Crisis Hotline. All of us here at CLW Studios believe that mental health is a vital part of our well being. The more people I meet and the more places I go, the more I realize how important it is to make people aware of the fact that there is no shame in enjoying the parts of our lives that are incredible. It's time for some radical joy. And this week, the three fingers pointing back at me are for the ghosts of errors. Ding. Let's turn all of them notifications off. Talk about timing. Lord, what do you mean by ghosts of errors? Well, let me tell you how this starts. I've gotten back into fitness classes and it's making me feel amazing. I go to CrossFit Nijmegen and they absolutely beat the living tar out of me every time I set foot in the door. They say hello. We all have a wonderful chat before, we hug, etc. We get into about 55 minutes of life rethinking awful, and then we walk out of there to rebuild our lives after expending as much of our physical effort as we possibly can. Always enjoyed CrossFit for that because whenever I finish, I feel as though that I have left nothing in the tank. Everything feels like it's either sweat out on the floor or left in blood on a barbell or something like that, and that is a wonderful feeling. It also helps me reach my fitness goals, which is fantastic. The thing that I love the most about those kinds of classes and that sort of fitness regimen is the fact that whenever I finish, all of the noise, all of the clatter and clutter and static just seem to cease. They disappear. That's the part that I love the most because all of the things that sort of hide my light under a bushel are now no longer a part of the equation. And I love that. It's something I really enjoy. The reason being, ghosts of errors is an idea that I thought of because a lot of times I would walk back to my apartment whenever I finish, and sometimes I have to bicycle, sometimes I take the bus. It just depends on how I'm feeling that day, what the weather's like, etc. The thing is, whenever I'm on the way back to the apartment, that's almost always a time where I can sort of ruminate on all the things that are left inside my mind once I've destroyed my body in CrossFit. And pardon me for saying, I always feel a little self-conscious now whenever I bring up that word, that specific organization that I thoroughly enjoy. Because you're like, what's the different, vegans and CrossFitters? It's like, okay, cool, 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 whatever. I do this because I love it. I'm new to the neighborhood. The community is wonderful. They're teaching me more Dutch, which is a blast. The fitness programming is outstanding. And when I finish, there is a peace in me that I thoroughly enjoy. It serves my art and my creativity so strongly. It helps me understand what is next. It helps me to quiet the demons. I live a charmed existence, make no mistake. I'm not trying to say that I have it hard by any means. What I'm saying is because my peace had been disturbed for so long, there were so many things in my life that were actively working against me being a grounded, solid human being with a demeanor and a list of accomplishments and a soul and a heart that I'd be really proud of. And now that's starting to sort of settle back in again. My diet is back on point. I feel much healthier in my choices. I'm not eating feelings because I'm not having feelings as often that require a binge or sugar stuffing to alleviate. Another wonderful part of this is my fitness journey has brought me to a place whenever I finish, so many of the things that I love to write have usually come after a really intense fitness experience. because I do. I get rid of all of the things that sort of drown out the spirit of what it is I want to communicate, the topic I want to cover, or the gratitude or love that I want to show to something through written word. Another side of that, and that is where our topic comes in today, is the ghost of errors. Is that sometimes whenever I don't get quite enough done, what I have is a replaying of the sizzle reel of all the most embarrassing and cringeworthy moments of my entire life that run through my head. That sounds pretty unpleasant, doesn't it? Exactly. And so the ghost of the errors, that's something that I wanted to sort of unpack with us today, because it is one of those things where I think that anyone who is fairly concerned with their own improvement, growth, and evolution will dwell on these kinds of things occasionally as the errors, that these were the things that really did not serve me, and now looking back, I get so embarrassed when I think of it. And sometimes those are the prevalent thoughts whenever I'm on the back of that bicycle ring-a-ding-dinging my way back into Grafseweg. And I love it, because what I can do when those things happen, instead of dwell in that darkness and feel my shoulders creep toward my ears, or feel that wrinkle between my eyebrows really start to deepen. What I can do instead is really focus on when that happened. How long ago was that? Well, no, I know, and then I start to make excuses for why I should still feel some sort of shame or cringeworthy reaction to something that I did eons, literal decades ago, when I was young and stupid and thinking I knew everything when I knew nothing. And it still bothers me. It still really gets underneath my skin. And I hope you can hear the smile in my voice whenever I say that, because I just want to pay homage to the fact that you do those things, because those are memories you will never forget. Those are lessons that will stay with you until your last breath on earth. And they're valuable. They're important. They're precious, even, because those kinds of things are the things that you say something completely out of line to someone you love, and it plucks a chord in your heartstring, and you just want to crawl in a hole and cover it with a blanket and don't come out for 3 days, right? Here's the thing, I don't know that the people who really love you the most are going to give two hoots about something that you said in the heat of the moment, when you were young and stupid, all these kinds of things. And yet, it can still haunt a perfect spring afternoon on the back of a Schwinn pedaling through the Netherlands. Okay? And when you frame it, when you really take a look at exactly what it is that you're dealing with, it becomes so small. The minutia of it, just it's comical. And it's just so funny to me, because these are the things where perspective is so important. The point of view is so unbelievably crucial in moments like this, to make sure that you look at that for exactly what it was, which is a learning experience when you were younger, thinking you knew it all, had the world on a string, and perhaps you did know quite a lot, and you had several continents wrapped around your finger. Delicious. There's still always something to be learned. And now that I look back on that, and it makes me shudder, and it makes my nose wrinkle whenever I think about it, because it was such a silly thing to do. I can also look back and know that the people that were in my life at the time, who were there to bear witness, know that it's just because that's who you were when it happened. And instead of focusing on the haunting of those ghosts of the mistakes in the past, what I want to do is look at it as sort of like an echo of a lesson from years gone by. I think that is a much more serviceable perspective on that phenomenon because let's be honest, I don't think any of us can run from that for very long. Am I right? I know I look back at some of these things. There are things that I will see in my day to day life, a book, a movie title, a song, a smell, an aroma specifically that will magically transport me back to a day where, the worst problems that I had to worry about were a zit before a big function or whether or not that crush returned my affections. And whenever you think about it like that, you have to understand how much smaller the world was back then. So these phenomena seemed much, much larger in comparison. And now that I have grown into a world and my world has grown with me, I look back at these things that used to make me cringe, and I am looking at that and responding to that as the young, small man that I was when that happened, instead of the larger, more mature, more highly educated, well traveled individual who has been through many a harrowing experience since. And I can just laugh. I can smile. I can appreciate it for what it is, which is just one of those things, man. I wrote a little something a while back. I came across this beautiful young couple while I was in Melbourne, Australia on tour with the guys. And it was wonderful. She was stunning. This young lady was so beautiful, and she had this backless dress where it was like a white satin something with barely a crisscross, and her entire back was completely exposed. It tied behind the neck. The waist of it sat just above her hiney, like right there on top of her little booty. She looked amazing. She had beautiful blonde hair, a very light makeup, like all these kind of things. She was just the bloom of youth, right? You know what I'm talking about when I say something like that. I want to be very respectful. I also want to make sure I draw a very vivid, clear picture. And this young man that was with her, God bless him, they'll look back at pictures of themselves at this era in their lives and they will smile, and it will have just a little shudder with it as well. She looks amazing no matter what, timeless beauty. This poor young man in his curly mullet and his fuzzy mustache with the oversized t-shirt and the billowy sort of barrel-legged slacks and the Converse. I look at that and I'm just like, oh my goodness. It's so wonderful to look at something like that and know how much they're loving right now. And when something happens, which invariably it will, something will happen that will be an obstacle to the two of them getting any closer for a moment, hopefully. I hope that good for them. And they'll look back on that one day, something will trigger that memory, and it will be a shudder-worthy moment. And I I'm always torn how to look at things like that. Like there is this wonderful beauty and vitality in youth that is just so delicious and wonderful. And I look at it and I want to say that I feel just a little envy for it. And then there's another part of me that's just like, no, because I lived fully in that era of my life too. And what I'm looking at now is young people that are going through this for the first time with this person. And it is beautiful. I saw them at dinner and they were just so fun because they were so close to each other while they were conversing, like hair's breadth between noses while they were chatting. I don't know if it was because of the noise in the room. I doubt it. Something tells me they could have hurt each other very, very easily. I think this was just an overwhelming need to be near one another as much as they possibly could. And that's great. Her back, she was so very thin. She was very and not skinny, just lean, like the leanness of youth, and you could see her ribs flutter underneath her porcelain skin, and her skin all over the back in this beautiful dress was splotchy. Like, I wonder what's going on back there. It's like, is she allergic to the dress? Is it the material, or maybe she's come in contact with something? And then I just, I would watch and I'd glance and I'd look over. I don't want to be a creeper, but it was a really sweet thing to watch. It really was. And I noticed it's like, oh, it's the heat from his palms because as they speak, he puts his hand on her back in differing places so he can bring his ear in even closer to her mouth so he can hear her even more clearly. And because of the excitement or the heat exchange or whatever, she is splotching where he has touched her skin. And I love that. That is the ghost. That is the memory, the echo of years past that I would love to slide up in there whenever I'm having those ghosts of error that tend to haunt my noggin on the way home from a particularly nasty fitness session. I want to remember times like that. I want to remember that one specific giggle of that one specific person when I did that one specific thing with my eyelash on a cheekbone. Right? Exactly. I want to remember the groan grunt of frustration whenever you know exactly the button to push on that one special person whose whole thing was the tension between the two of you that you found most delicious ways to alleviate. That's the ghost. That's the echo of memory I want to take with me. When I was on Scholars Bowl a million years ago and we just decimated, and it got to the point where other teams knew who we were because we were just that good. A million years ago. God, this was so, so, so long ago. It's still one of those things that the memory and the echo continues to reverberate on the inside of my heart, giving me something wonderful from younger days to remember and be proud of. Even the ghosts of error teach a lesson, means that by their definition, they are valuable. And so, even though it may make me feel a certain way and make me feel embarrassed or shame or whatever it is that I might consider to be negative, I can also flip that so that it's something that is helpful and nourishing and helps me cultivate an appreciation for the hardship and the embarrassment that I had to endure in order to learn this lesson to be better the next time it came to see me. Almost everything I deal with is gonna repeat itself. There's gonna be a rerun of it somewhere down the line. I'm gonna have the opportunity to live better, to do wiser and smarter. The question is, am I going to remember the lesson I learned the first time we went through this little moment? And I like to think that the more upsetting the memory, the more vivid the lesson will be when it comes around to visit again. I'm curious, how many of you out there do that sort of thing? Like, I'll be sitting there perfectly content by myself if I'm writing or looking at my phone or whatever, and all of a sudden I'll just have this knee jerk moment. In the South, we call it, a possum walking over your grave or something like that, because we're very colorfully vernacular type people, and you can't just say you caught a shiver. No, that it needs to be described in some sort of euphemism. You're welcome. And usually it's about one of these little moments. It'll be about something that I did, things that I'm really ashamed of, things that I did in my past that I would have loved to have been able to erase or make amends for someone that I wronged in the past. Like, I'll never forget when I was in kindergarten, this little boy dropped all of his lunch and snack money on the ground. And me and my little partner in crime buddy in kindergarten, I don't want to call any names just in case this person doesn't want to be mentioned in such a light. We snatched it all up. And that little boy cried and he was so upset and it was terrible. I don't know that I'd ever seen anybody that upset about something that I had done to them specifically before this time in my life. And though my little partner in crime emptied his pockets and gave this kid back all the money, I was resolute. I stuck to my guns. said I didn't do it, kept the snack money in my pocket, and that was the end of it. Now, whenever I got home that day, my mother had a little something something she wanted to discuss with me because, of course, my teacher was vigilant. She made sure that word got back to the authorities in my own household so that we could handle that at home as families are expected to do. Pardon my old fashioned thinking this whenever I think that that would be something that is much better handled at home than it is at the school. And thinking on that this day, it still embarrasses me to my core. It's one of those things where James, you got to give yourself some grace. I do. I understand that there is absolutely nothing I can do about this 11,000 years later. It reminds me to be a better man. Because when I got home, my mom's like, hey, so Miss Wilson says, and she retells the story of what went on, and I know I'm God. I know I'm God. She says, this little boy dropped his money, and Miss Wilson tells me that you and your little partner in crime are the ones who snatched it up, and she had to get it back for him. She says, you know what we call that, right? I said, no, ma'am. She says, yes, you do. She says, your little partner in crime gave back all the money that he took from that little boy's dropping. She says, and I don't know that you did. And Miss Wilson doesn't know that you did either. So she got in touch with me, and now we have to talk like this because you know what that is. I was a very, very good kid in certain respects. I wanted to be a good boy. I did. Not a whole lot has changed. I think the definition of good has changed over the years because good to a 5-year-old is very different than the good you're capable of doing as a full-grown man. And so the ghost of that error will haunt me until the day they put me in the ground because I knew it was stealing. That's what she was going for. Mama was telling me, and she was so gentle about it. She knew, I knew, everybody knew. It was one of those things where this was a teaching moment of epic proportion. And I want to give her an enormous award for that because my house was also a corporal punishment house. It is what it is. I'm not putting a sticker on it, good, bad, or indifferent. What I'm saying is there were also instances where there was a spare the rod, spoil the child mentality, and I have taken many a stripe to the leg because I was also a very willful good boy. Hats off, blue ribbons in parenting to my mom for being so gentle and so clear and persistent because she knew that I knew. And whenever we came to that realization, it all came together and it never happened again. And I want to say that there were amends made the next day, but I'll be honest with you, the resolution wasn't nearly as memorable as the lesson. And I love that and I hate it at the same time. There are some lessons that have to be learned so harshly. And it's one of those things where if it has to be so ugly and so deep, and the memory has to be something that is burned into your psyche because of how important it is to you. The good news is when those situations come around again, there is a goodness, there is a sustenance taken away from a lesson like that that you know not to repeat when the universe gives you another opportunity to show her how much better you are and how far you've come. And I love that. I'm so fortunate that I get other opportunities to show the eyes that are watching. Whether it's the guiding hand of the universe, the connection that we all share, or just the individual who, for whatever reason, needs to know the kind of person I am, then many times I can really show up. And even though I have these ghosts that haunt me and they shake me and they rattle my bones and they get into the aches of my joints at times. The lesson is always there, and they're almost always connected to something where I made a mistake. And even though we don't love stickers and labels here, I can definitely say that that was an error in judgment on my part. And I was given the opportunity to do better. And when it came around again, I was able to recognize it, and I was able to pull out a skill set that was going to help me navigate this in a way that I could move over to the other side of it with integrity and honor and hopefully a little bit of help for somebody else. And I don't mean to say this that I'm any kind of good person. I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm not trying to, hang my own laurels here. What I am trying to say is I've messed up a lot. What I'd like to think is every time that I have that little moment where my shoulders end up in my ears, that is me reminding myself that it was a lesson I will never forget. And when given the opportunity to prove my education, I will do better. And I like that. I like it a lot, if I'm honest. I think it's a really important thing to make sure that folks have a way that you have benchmarks where you can look at a time, you're like, oh, yes, and the reason why I do this way now, this happened. And I did something that was really not kind to another person that really, really upset them, or worse, hurt them in a way that I could never fix again. A lot of errors get much, much bigger and a lot less solvable as we get older. The consequences are far more dire when we have mortgages and families of our own and big boy jobs. That just came out of nowhere. I don't know. And I think we get those training wheel cringy moments so that whenever we're behind of a moving vehicle, whenever we're full grown, we know to avoid those potholes and those hazards in the road, because the consequences can be so much more dire whenever we are, you know, eh, out of underoos. Which may or may not be the best example because I still wear very colorful underpants. But yeah, it's one of those things where you just have to be so careful about it. They're there for a reason. That cringe, that jump, that gets right down into the core of my being is also there to make sure that I was given the grace to mess that up as a kid, so that whenever I become a man, it doesn't carry the consequences that could literally change the trajectory of someone's destiny. And I'm grateful for it. I love it. I think it's so important to continue to remember that I think our lives are like ripples in a pool. You throw the proverbial pebble into the still pool, and I think once it breaks the surface, that is birth. And the ripples that emanate from that epicenter, they start very small, and then they continue to grow as they travel farther out from that moment of inception. And as they grow, they reach farther and they affect more and more surface area from where they began. And I think that is a very apt metaphor for life and learning those things very close to where the pebble went into the water, so that by the time that those ripples meet the shore, the lesson you've learned, the impetus, the motion behind it doesn't get marred by another similar mistake farther down the line, farther away from that beginning. At least I hope so. I'm keeping fingers crossed that I continue to have these little moments of shiver and disappointment, I guess. Because there always will be a point where you just wish you were smarter when you were a kid, but you don't know what you don't know, friends. And so whenever I have moments like that, I give it grace, and then I look forward a little bit. I flash forward in my life to see where that lesson learned kept me from doing something really stupid that could have altered the course of my history and could have put me on a very different path. And I'll be honest, I'm really loving the path that I'm on right now. Is it perfect? No. Is it as close as I could possibly get it? Yeah. Yes, it is. And that, just like anything else, comes from perspective. You can focus on the things you love. You can focus on the things that you're doing so well. You can focus on the people by whom you are doing well and know that you're doing what you came to do, what you were put on this earth to achieve. Or you can flip it and continue to dwell on all the things that you messed up whenever chances are really good you're the only person who still remembers that error. Time is a wonderful concept. Those little crinkly things at the corner of each of my eyeballs, I get annoyed. I see pictures of me like, oh man. And I want to reach for those little golden eyeball patches that you put on and leave on for like half an hour after you've gotten out of the shower. And then there's a part of me that understands that I earned those. Why? Because I continue to smile through it. I learn. I feel awful whenever I find out that something I've done has hurt someone that I had no intention or knowledge of doing it. And then I learn and I do better to make sure I do everything in my power to prevent repetition. And that's the thing. You learn. And this thing keeps it going on and on and on. Speaking of learning, like I was mentioning earlier and just didn't quite finish the thought, you can either dwell on the things that are going so well in your life, or you can continue to look at the things that you didn't get. And I'm not even talking about a refusal. I'm just talking about something that just didn't come to fruition the way that you'd expected it. Not an active, but even a passive. Some people dwell on that so hard. And I'm here to say, friends, if it's a passive something that just didn't happen, it wasn't that it was blocked or refused, it just didn't come together. There's a reason. Do I know what it is? Of course not. And some people call it fatalist. I just call it a difference in perspective. Great. Eventually, it will come to light why this didn't happen the way I really, really hoped it would. And sometimes you just got to trust the process. And that's exactly what I want to do. I love the time we get to spend together. I do. I love my new setup. I feel a little, pardon me, I feel a little closer to the microphone than I normally am. Is it reading like that? Is it enjoyable? Is it ASMRing for you? If this was your first episode of Radical Joy, welcome. We're so glad you're here. I hope something we've been able to discuss today moved you to response. I hope it moved you to a place where you were able to yes or amen the phone or the listening device, wherever it is that you're enjoying our time together. If this is not your first episode, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. I love having you here at Radical Joy, and I hope what we're doing together is something of a huge help to you. I know it is to me. If you're the kind of person who loves to leave a review, please do that for us. On whatever platform you're listening, please leave us a 5-star review. Take a screenshot of that, send it to us here at Radical Joy. We would love to hear from you, especially if you're enjoying or getting something out of the podcast. Always wonderful to hear from our listeners. When you send us that copy of the 5-star review, we'll be happy to send you a little swag. Hear from our brand new and improved, rebranded Season 3 Radical Joy swag bag. As always, friends, we love you. We appreciate you. We thank you so much for your loyalty and for the time that we all get to spend together every single week here at Radical Joy. Please never forget, we love y'all.